How are you doing this Monday?
I am sick, but I'm excited for our conversation.
Well, thank you for doing it, even though you're sick. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm always down to talk about the series.
Are you good if we just get started?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just dive right in.
Welcome back to the Jackson Neill Music Podcast here on Tuesday, February 19th, 2019. Thank you so much for tuning in. SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find this one. Got a great episode planned for you guys today. Today, I'm bringing on Donna-Claire Chesman of DJBooth to talk about her series, Year of Mac Miller. She's been doing it now for a couple months. I had her on back in around November when the series just started, but she's had tons great more pieces on there with interviews with people like Rapsody, Syd, Edan, has great stuff coming out, other great opinion pieces. I can't stress enough how great this series really is. It's one of my favorite things to read about. I think for any fan of Mac Miller and his musical work, it's a really cool thing to read each and every week. So I brought Donna on to talk about all of that, so much more, where this series is headed, where it's been, and just how timeless Mac Miller's discography truly is. All right, perfect. So I just want to, you've been doing this now for, a couple months. You're a couple months in this series. How's it just coming along?
Oh, my God. It's some of the best writing I think I've ever done. And truth be told, we have pieces. Let me pull up the calendar. We have pieces ready for up until the 8th of May. So I'm very ahead. I'm halfway done, and it feels very good. I haven't burnt out yet. I take breaks, and I write them in batches, so that's really helpful. I was really scared I was going to just write too much and then burn out, but that hasn't happened yet, and I'm grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when you have a year-long series with all these different pieces, it has to be intimidating looking down at, I need 52 of these if I want to do one per week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. But now I'm at 27, and it feels like I've gotten over so many hurdles. I feel like I can kind of do anything at this point. And I was worried that maybe I wouldn't be able to have enough ideas, but the ideas keep coming. And I think the best part definitely is that the more that I do these pieces, the more people read them, the more interview subjects I get, and those are my favorite by far to do, is when I get to talk to people like Edan and when I get to talk to people like Syd about Mac Miller's legacy and what he meant to them. That's, nothing can compare.
Exactly. I mean, in that, I was about to ask you if the ideas have run out, and it seems like you just kind of keep them coming week after week. You're already 27 done, looking forward.
Yeah. I am just continuously trying to think of new ways that I can interpret the music, that I can pull other people into conversations about the music. I'm just trying to be creative with it, but also really pay homage whenever I can.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And a little before you mentioned the interviews, and that's something I really want to dive into, because those are some of my favorite pieces as well, especially the Rapsody and Syd pieces. I think your selection with these interviews have been very, very good. I just want to kind of get inside your head. How do you decide who to try to interview for this series?
Well, I have a running list of people that have worked with him that I think would be willing to talk to me, because it's always such a thing of, can we secure the interview? That's why Syd was such a big get for me, because not only am I a huge fan of her, I'm a huge fan of the internet, I'm a huge fan of the work that she's done with Mac, that they've done with Mac, but additionally, she doesn't do a lot of interviews. So that was like a top tier get for me when she had, accepted my reach out and been like, yeah, I'll do this. That was, huge moment for me. Rapsody is another one. I mean, she's been Grammy nominated. I can't believe she has time for little old me to talk about something so special to me. But it's really that. It's just that combination of, can I talk to this person? And then what is their relationship to Mac Miller's music?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Rapsody. I talked with her with a phone interview like a year or so ago, back when she was her Grammy nomination came out. Even that short conversation, she's awesome. She's a great one.
Yeah, absolutely. She's fantastic to talk to. She has such a stage-like energy. She's just very methodical when she speaks, and she speaks from the heart no matter what the subject matter is. So it's just such a pleasure, and I'm very humbled that she found the time to do something so special for me.
Exactly. And I think when you said there, speaks from the heart, you look at these interviews that you've done, especially the Syd and Rapsody ones I really want to focus in on, and they do offer a lot of personal insight into Mac Miller's legacy and what he meant to them. I would just ask you, doing these interviews, writing these articles with these interview subjects, what is maybe a couple things that have really popped out to you about Mac that maybe you didn't realize, but you now do after these interviews?
How silly he was and how generous. I think those are the two big ones. I have an interview coming with Big Germ where he tells me this hilarious story about him going to the studio in his early days, and then the story that Rap told me about there needing to be Welch's fruit snacks on the rider. I think things like that really capture how, no matter how dark the music got, he was a very happy person, and I think it's so important in the wake of someone's passing to remember their happiness as opposed to their sadness. And again, his generosity. He was so kind. He just was one of the most giving people. And when the Germ interview comes out, I think that'll be self-evident.
Exactly. You mentioned those stories. I think those have been some of the coolest parts to hear those different anecdotes, because I think more than almost any other artist so far, all these crazy little different things that show these different parts of the character that he had throughout his life.
Yeah, I think that it was his willingness to work with everyone that makes these interviews such a pleasure, is because he's touched so many people. It'd be kind of impossible to run out of interview subjects. Like Wednesday, I have an interview with Thelonious Martin coming out, and the generosity that he expressed to Thilo when they first met in their first interaction is just so becoming. I think obviously it's made me like his music more, but it's really given me new perspective on all of his collaborative efforts, because they sound warmer to me now. And I think that when you read the interviews and you get inside these stories, it's hard to listen to something like Live from Space and not feel a warmth coming from it.
Exactly. I think these, when you hear these stories, it adds so much more to the music. I mean, doing this interview today, I was going back, rereading all your pieces and listening to more Mac Miller music. I mean, I've listened to all of it already, but just keep on listening to it, and I think it definitely does add that next dimension to it in the listening experience.
Absolutely, it's such a pleasure to hear these stories, and then I immediately go back and I'll listen to the collaborations, and they feel so much more human to me. And I think that's the bread and butter of the series, is this is how I keep him alive in my mind, is by getting these stories out there. And the biggest shame of it all is that he had to pass for some of these stories to get out there, but the good news is that they are. And I guess you can't dwell on the catalyst for why these stories are out there. You just kind of have to keep telling them and push forward.
Definitely. If I could give you one big compliment I have throughout this entire series, it is, you mentioned it kind of there, is mentioning it's not all, you're remembering Mac Miller, and you're doing an excellent job of balancing both your personal connection with his music and telling the overarching story, like all these different stories in a more objective kind of view of who he was as a person. How do you try to achieve that balance, I guess, of offering your own excellent writing and opinions into all of this, as well as, just talking about who he was as a person in the eyes of so many people?
I think it's because I even get sick of my own feelings, so I can't imagine that anyone would ever want to read 52 pieces of just my emotions. I think that would be quite the slog. But a more serious response, I think it's just, I love to tell stories, and the way that you tell a good story is with variety. And so, of course, I have these pieces like the I Am Who I Am piece about, thinking about life, thinking about how precious it is. And that was very much me focused. But then I love doing the interviews because I'm not at all involved in that. Like, I'm talking to these people, but the intros are short. My questions are short. It's really just giving them the floor. And that's the biggest pleasure to me, is giving the floor to other people to kind of lift up this person that's so important to me. So I feel like that's just the best way to do it. And then the pieces where I'm like really breaking down his music, that's just what I do. That's just what gets me excited, is when I hear something and I hear a motif and I think, well, this reminds me of that and that reminds me of this. And now I have this whole idea about, like, for example, I have a piece coming about how there's this big superhero motif across his music, or I had the castle motif come out in January. And things like that are very exciting to me because I think that we overlook how he webbed ideas so well. And I would be hard-pressed to believe that it was by accident. I definitely think perhaps these things started out by accident, but he's too methodical of a creative to not have been building these motifs into his music, at least on some kind of subconscious and conscious level.
Mm-hmm, certainly. I mean, as I read your pieces discussing, especially like the castle motif, it's something there that when I read as you describe it, it's like, oh, I see it there in the music, but I never thought of it. I think you've done an excellent job bringing out those like you said, those parts we might have been overlooking in his discography, because when you go through it, not only is there a lot, it's so dense. There's so many little things to pick out for each and every song and every project.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when I was doing the superhero motif, I listened through the discography, and to make my life easier, I had to like focus it in on just commercial releases, because if I was going back through the mixtapes, there were all these other little mentions and all these little details that could be interpreted. And, I guess the good news is because it's my series, I make the rules so I can give myself workable parameters. But I'm so happy that when you read that, you take away such oh, I didn't think of that, because that's the kind of moment that I'm really after when I'm writing.
Well, you're certainly doing an excellent job with that. And I just kind of want to ask another more broad, overarching question, because going into this, you must have had some kind of expectation for, I guess, how this series would progress. Has it kind of taken you into different avenues maybe than you even expected to? Have there been kind of some pieces you've written that you look back and think, wow, I never expected to be going this way with the series?
Well, I'll be honest, I have no recollection of writing anything I've ever written.
Okay.
After I write something, and this is very true, I think, for a lot of writers, is after I write something, when I read it back, I think about how there's no way that I could have written this. And not in like, oh my God, I'm such a good writer way. I mean, fundamentally, I couldn't have written that again. So I read back the pieces that I wrote, and I look at the sentences, and I look at the words, and I think, could I have written this right now in this moment? And the answer is no. So it's taken me on a journey just by virtue of the fact that I'm writing so much. And after I write something, I can only write it in that moment. And then once that moment's gone, I'll never be able to write that piece again. Mm-hmm. So like, I finished writing the Faces piece, which is, I think, going to be a big one. It's what I believe to be my best writing thus far of any genre of writing. And I read it back to myself this morning. I wouldn't have been able to write that this morning. Those words wouldn't have come together in the order that they did just this morning. Because that's what makes it so exciting, is even writing the pitches, I wouldn't be able to write them unless I'm just in that moment. So I didn't think that I would be doing a lot of motif work, and I didn't think that I would be grouping songs together and making little EPs out of them. But that's just where my mind was for that moment, and I had a bunch of those ideas, and then I just seized that moment. And once it passes, I'm on to another kind of little creative renaissance.
Oh, that's a really cool description. I've never heard it described in that way, but I could imagine that's such a cool, creative, and just kind of freeing process in the moment, like you've said, about writing each and every piece and just saying, hey, let's see where this goes. Let's see what else I can dig into his discography. Let's see what else I can see from his music and his time that we can take in and learn more about, I guess.
Yeah, it's really just an exploratory thing. I like to describe writing as falling down a very long well, and then you just kind of describe what you see as you fall all the way down, and then once you get to the bottom, that's it. You send it off.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I like that.
Well, thank you. I am a professional writer.
Oh, a professional writer over here, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for them. All joking.
That is a big joke of mine. I love to say that because I don't feel like a professional writer. I feel very lucky at all times.
Well, I mean, I certainly enjoy your writing, and I think you're worthy of being a professional writer. How about that?
Oh, that's so kind of you.
So this is a question that I really want to ask you because I'm just curious. How much, I would say on average, on a daily basis, how much Mac Miller music do you listen to doing this series?
Well, even on days when I'm not writing the series, I will typically listen to 3 or 4 of his projects just in a day. I'll usually listen to Good AM in the morning, per its name. I listen to watching movies at night. I listen to swimming before bed. I'll listen to the Divine Feminine when I'm feeling, like there's hope in the world. And I'll put on Faces when I'm feeling like I'll put on Faces. There's really no wrong time to listen to that project. Mm-hmm. But I definitely listen to maybe 3 to 5 hours of his music a day, whether I'm writing about it or not. And on days when I am writing about it, I'm probably listening to less albums and more just like a specific song over and over again because I'm stuck on a particular moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Wow, that is a lot. I've always considered myself to be a big Mac Miller fan, listening to him a lot, but I will say you have me beat there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky that I get to work in a profession where I can listen to music all day. Working from home, there's no one around to tell me that I have to turn it down or that, there's a meeting going on. Because when there's a meeting going on, I'm the one that's having the meeting. Once it's over, mm-hmm. the music comes back on. Yeah. But I also wake up very early in the morning. Well, not very early. I get up at 7 and I start writing right away. So just imagine from 7 to 12, music is just playing. And then I'll eat. And then from, 1 to 5, music is just playing. So there's a big chunk of that that's just Mac Miller music. And I never get tired of it, which I'm sure is self-evident at this point.
I think I've started to pick up on that, but I think a lot of people feel the same way. I think that's why this series is so powerful.
Yeah, he just has such a brilliant discography in that you can really go through and just watch the maturation of a human being. I think that's what makes him so accessible to listen to, is there's so much variety. I have a very dear friend of mine, her name is JoJo, and she had never listened to a full Mac Miller album, which, for shame, and she was like, oh, what should I listen to? And I pointed her to Good AM first, but I gave her like this whole like roadmap for how to listen to him because he pivots every time, and within songs he pivots even, and that's so exciting as he was always growing. And I definitely think that's because he was always collaborating with people. He was always working with people and always working on himself as an artist. And I think he had a bit of an obsession with creation, which is something that I've gotten from my interviews with Edan and my interviews with Germ. And just really everyone that I've spoken to has alluded to the fact that he was so crazy obsessed with music. And I think that's just the best way to be, is to just be crazy obsessed about the thing that you love.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the way to do it, honestly, is, to do it, to be crazily obsessed where you see the most progress. And I think we definitely saw that throughout his entire discography. With listening to all of that music, though, I think, which project of his in your mind, have you been surprised to learn as much as you have from it, I guess, where, maybe you hadn't listened to that one as much as the others, but listening back over and over to it, you've gained a lot more in your series?
Definitely Best Day Ever. I think that's like great, but every Sunday morning I listen to Best Day Ever now. I'll make myself an espresso and I'll listen to Best Day Ever. And that makes me sound like an old woman, but I am. And I think that project just really speaks to me in a way where it just sounds like happiness. Mm-hmm. It just sounds like joy. And I love hearing him call out to Edan, and I love hearing him call out to Germ. And I have such a affinity for when artists in general call out to their producers and their engineers on the track. It just has nice warm feeling to it. But that project, to me, I thought was a fine project, like all early Mac Miller stuff. It's like good and happy. But I was listening to Best Day Ever because I was looking to feel better. And ever since I had that kind of moment with it, that's why I wanted to interview Germ as opposed to just write about it. Because again, 52 pieces of my feelings, no one wants that. Not even I want that, and I love my feelings. But speaking to Germ about the making of the project really put into perspective to me how much pure joy went into that one in particular. And so now when I listen to it, all I feel is just an unfiltered happiness. And I think we all deserve to feel that way. So without giving too much away about that interview, that project was made with just happiness and friendship in mind. And I think that makes it such a special part of his discography.
Mm-hmm. And I just love the saying, it's the best day ever. It's so simple yet so uplifting.
Yeah, that's really why I like it so much, is because sometimes you just want to feel happy with no strings attached. You don't want to think too hard. You don't need non sequiturs and triple entendres. You just want to feel good. And I think we all deserve to feel good. So that's definitely a go-to project for me. It feels like Sunday morning when you wake up and it's sunny and you have all of the opportunities in the world to make the day your day.
Mm-hmm. I never listened to it on Sunday morning, but now that you mention it, that does sound like the perfect time to listen to it. I'll have to give it a try this upcoming Sunday.
I think it's interesting you say that, because I was speaking with a colleague of mine. I was talking to Yo, and he told me what he likes about the series is that it makes him listen to the project with fresh ears. And that's something that the series has done for me, is I've listened to his discography hundreds of times over, but I come to it, or at least I try to come to each song with fresh ears every single time I listen to any song, any project, any even verse. I try to really apply a fresh perspective to it so that I could deliver these pieces without, droning on about the same thing.
Mm-hmm. I think that definitely occurred to me with when you wrote about the High Life. I never really listened to that one that much, and then reading about it and then going back and listening, I think it gave me a new appreciation for the project. And I think it's done it for a lot of his discography so far. But that's one that really sticks out in my mind, is where I had a similar feeling.
Yeah, it's an undertaking in that you have to really go and try and hear it as if you're hearing it for the first time, but at the same time, listen to it with really adept, matured ears. So it's this balancing act of, I know so much about this person and about their creative process and about their music and what their music means, but I want to hear this like it's brand new. And how do I bridge those worlds and then turn that into something interesting to read?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think you hit it right there on the nail on the head. And it's a difficult way to balance, like you said, listening to it, like trying to decipher everything that's going on while still, having that newness to it for each every listen.
Yeah, I think the perfect example of that is the Buttons program Small Worlds piece I did, because putting them together and making it like an EP as a concept that's not foreign. Plenty of writers have done that. But then I was listening to each song and trying to figure out, well, what is the through line between all of these songs? And when I thought about Calls Missed and Calls Taken and Being Left Alone, and this whole notion of talking in circles and being in an argument with yourself and with someone that you love and your significant other, I think I would have never gotten there if I wasn't sitting there with fresh ears every single time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I mean, and if you're talking about when you like to listen to a particular Mac Miller song or mixtape or anything, for me, Buttons, whenever I'm coming home, maybe back to Philadelphia after visiting home on the weekend, Sunday afternoons riding the train into Philly, that's my song. That is the one I always go to with the sun setting.
That's beautiful. I've never listened to it while the sun sets, so I'm gonna have to.
That's if you have to. I'll listen to Best Day Ever on Sunday morning if you listen to Buttons as the sun sets. That's our deal.
I take the train into Philly every so often as well, so I think that we have a deal.
Perfect. Sounds good. So I just, you mentioned you have this one with Germ coming up. You have some other, you have it already written, 27 of them. So just going forward, I guess, what would you tell everyone to expect with this Year of Mac series?
Oh my goodness, what to expect? Expect to really walk away from the series hearing the music like you've never heard it before. I have a piece coming called How Mac Miller Spoke Through the Piano, and that one I think really, I pull old interviews, I really break down his Spotify singles, and I just think about how is he making music different than anyone else? And then how can I write that so that you hear it differently? That's my goal going forward, is I want to write something that forces you to hear it differently. I want the words to impact the music. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if I can do that for you, then I've done my job. I love writing about, and I love writing about my emotional connection, and I love when I touch people's feelings, but there's more to it than that. And I never wanted it to become, and I'm grateful that it hasn't become just like a feelings fest. I think that when I first started, I had this fear that I would just be in my feelings way too much. I'd be too emotional. I would just keep writing these very sad pieces about, like, this means this to me, that means that to me. It would be hyper specific, and it wouldn't be able to reach people in a broader way. And I don't think that's happened. Or at the very least, I've done everything in my conceivable power to make sure that this stays first and foremost about the music. And I'm there, and I'm on this ride with you, but it's about the music. Mm-hmm,
mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview. I'm so excited. I'm really, really loving this series, and I'm glad that there's still a lot more left because it's one of my favorite things to read each and every week. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm very happy that we got to talk.
Again, a big thank you to Donna for coming onto the podcast. Remember, go down in the description of this podcast on whatever feed or whatever platform you're listening on. I'll have links to all of her stuff, where you can find the Year of Mac series, where you can follow her on Twitter. She's one of my favorite writers and one of my favorite projects right now, so definitely make sure to check out the Year of Mac every single week on DJBooth. With that, that'll wrap it up for this edition of the Jackson Neill Music Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to check in on Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iTunes, YouTube, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. This one is there, in addition to the Jackson Neill Sports and Anything Goes the Jackson Neill Podcast, so check all of those out as well. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JacksonNeill20. Links to those down in the description. And with that, I'll see you all next time.